A Look at Health is underwritten by the Saratoga Regional YMCA. Your health, your way.
Welcome back. Well, it's Monday, so I'm here with Dr. Paul Arciero, and we talk about health and wellness and well-being.
What else is there to talk about?
Well, you know what? You may not know it from the weather out there, but spring is coming, and both Paul and I noticed this week there was a lot of attention paid to carbohydrates.
On everybody's mind.
Yeah.
And I always
Now,
think,
why?
Yeah. Well, who doesn't like eating a big bowl of pasta?
Right.
Or how about a big slice of pie?
That's right.
So, yeah, carbohydrates are abundant. They're everywhere. And they're not going away, that's for sure. So what we have to do is we have to find ways to adapt. We have to find ways to be nimble in order to continue to enjoy those carbohydrate-rich foods and not suffer the consequences of what sometimes they result in.
Well, you know, all the attention paid to carbohydrates, everybody has an example. I eat a bowl of pasta, the next day I have 3 pounds. Now, as the older I get, it's a little harder to lose the 3 pounds, but why instantly do you gain weight when you absorb carbohydrates?
I'll just say this. You have to eat carbohydrates to gain weight. You know that there's a group of people that can look at carbohydrates and gain weight? Just
Yeah, I
kidding.
know.
So, yeah, it's pretty easy. And the reason is this, Jesse. So scientifically, without boring anybody, when we eat carbohydrate, first of all, it's the most available energy source we have. It's the best source of energy that our bodies can utilize quickly, and we can store it as for later use. Now, in excess, it contributes to fat deposition or fat depositing on our body. And the reason is this: when we eat carbohydrate, it's all converted eventually into a form of carbohydrate called glucose, or what we sometimes refer to as blood sugar. And when that happens, a hormone is released from our pancreas called insulin. And insulin is the hormone that's responsible for storing energy in our body. And its most prime player of what it uses is glucose to do that.
Now, why would your body do that? I mean, you're storing fat, but fat in a sense then allows your body to release energy, or you use it up?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
good. So both of those. So when we take in carbohydrate, insulin is released, and insulin stores the carbohydrates in our body. But when we reach our maximum level of storage of carbohydrate, that glucose has to be converted into something, and the likely player is fat. And
Yeah,
so that's the connection between carbohydrate and fat development.
All right, so then if you're a diabetic, you have an additional problem because you have trouble producing insulin, correct?
That's exactly
Yes,
right.
right,
So,
okay.
and there's of course 2 different types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 would be those individuals that require insulin shots. Type 2 diabetics would be those individuals that have a difficult time of having their insulin do the job it's supposed to do. But in either case, it's an issue with insulin and its relationship with glucose.
Now, you were saying, and I'm sure our viewers would find this interesting, there are complex carbohydrates and what's the simple carbohydrates? I don't know. What's the difference there?
Oh, great. And those are important questions for people to understand. So a simple carbohydrate is one which is rapidly absorbed from our intestinal tract. And so it contributes to increasing our blood sugar very, very quickly. So we want to try to limit those. Those would be things like soda, the number 1 player in simple carbohydrates, candy, and other refined carbohydrate sources, pasta. So there are both simple sugars from soda and table sugar, sucrose, but then also from certain foods. And so we have to be careful about consuming too many of those simple sugars. And then the other carbohydrate are the complex carbohydrates. And the benefit of those are they're absorbed slower into the blood, the sugar is, and so we don't have that spike in that blood sugar to make insulin get thrust into the blood in response so that it would store that energy then as fat.
Gotcha. Okay, so for our viewers and for me,
Yeah.
let's talk about what are examples of
Good.
complex carbohydrates.
Right, so complex carbohydrates come in all different shapes and forms, but I would classify them in the following way. The most healthy complex carbohydrates we can consume are fresh vegetables. So things like green leafy spinach and arugula and kale and carrots and all those colorful and abundant vegetables that we hopefully will have here soon. And then the next type would be the legumes from things like kidney beans, lentils, split peas, black beans. Those are great sources of carbohydrate, and they have a lot of fiber as well as the vegetable sources. And then another third type would be the whole grains and fresh fruits. And again, you can imagine the abundance of vitamins and minerals contained in both of those sources. And then the final source of carbohydrate is in dairy, yogurt and milk. We have some carbohydrate as well. But we want to focus on the vegetables, the legumes, the whole grains, and the fresh fruits as our major sources of carbohydrate.
So we're always talking about a balance,
Balance.
right? I know.
Absolutely.
And now when you're shopping, for instance, you can get regular pasta, yeah, and you can get whole grain pasta. So I think what you're saying is that for those of us that absolutely have to have pesto, they get a whole grain pasta.
If you can. And they make lots of different types. And what I used to do with my children when they were growing up, my wife and I, is we would buy one package of the white pasta and one package of the whole grain pasta. And we'd mix them together.
Right.
And before long, they were eating it without noticing, and we finally transitioned them all the way into the whole grains.
All
now, they're
right.
older now. They might be back to the white pasta. But we did have them there for a while with the whole grain.
Okay, so the moral to this story is that anything in moderation works, as usual.
Yep.
But you do hear a lot about carbohydrates. It's spring. Everybody wants to get in shape. But balance it out. You know, you wouldn't ordinarily think that fruits and vegetables contain carbohydrates, but they do.
Oh,
And
they're abundant.
And that the opportunity then to get whole grain also helps this absorption rate.
That's right, because
Yes,
we want to
good.
slow the absorption rate of the carbohydrates, and the addition of fiber that's included within the fresh vegetables and fruits, the legumes, and the whole grains is the primary player. And fiber is usually the answer to helping us absorb those carbohydrates slower, which then would prevent them from being stored as fat. So I think you hit it right on the nail right there, is that if we can eat those carbohydrate sources that we've just listed with the higher amounts of fiber, that's going to slow the absorption rate down considerably and not leave it available to be stored as fat so quickly in our body.
I got you. All right. So note to self, when you go to a restaurant, don't have a beer with your pasta, and when it's dessert, cake and a soda is probably not a good idea.
Probably not a good idea, unless the pasta's whole grain, then the beer would be
That's
okay.
right. All right, well, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
And to see this interview again, you can head to our website, looktvonline.com.